Let's talk a little bit more here about different types of research designs, starting with a popular favorite among psychologists, self-reports. So this involves asking people directly about what's going on in their minds using surveys or questionnaires or non-written interviews. And I think some people are a little bit too skeptical about the validity of self-reports. And to this, I would respond by saying, well, how do you go about getting information from other people? Like, let's say you watch a movie with a friend and you want to know if your friend liked the movie or not. You would just ask them straight up, did you like the movie? And they would tell you, and you would probably believe them no matter what their answer was. So I would say that self-reports, in terms of things like surveys and questionnaires or interviews, have many of the same advantages. They are part of a standard method for social communication. When we want to know what's inside someone's mind, we just ask them. And the questions we come up with tend to have high face validity. Face validity is what researchers call the intuitive sense that the questions we're asking people are assessing what we really want to know. The disadvantages to surveys or other types of self-reports may include that sometimes people lie, especially if their names are attached to the survey responses or if they don't want to reveal something embarrassing about themselves. Usually we can correct for this by giving people a social desirability scale if we're asking people about embarrassing or sensitive things. Self-reports also don't allow us to assess what are called implicit or sometimes subconscious processes. So some things that are beneath the surface of conscious awareness are not always things that we can reliably indicate to others using self-reports. Now we have quasi-experimental designs. Quasi-experimental designs are kind of an in-between true experiments and correlational designs. They are like experiments in the sense that we are comparing groups of participants together, but we don't create those groups. They occur naturally. For example, let's say we wanted to compare psychological well-being across groups of people who are either married or divorced. We cannot possibly create those groups. Not only would it be unfeasible, it would also probably be unethical. So we just have to ask people whether or not they're married. And now we have two groups of people, those who are married and those who are not, and we can compare them on a dependent variable. So quasi-experiments are like true experiments in the fact that we're comparing groups to each other and we have a dependent variable, but they suffer the similar limitations as correlational studies. We don't know if there's a cause and effect relationship here because we did not create those groups. There could be third variables that are causing both the independent variable and the dependent variable to happen. Now we have longitudinal studies, and this involves tracking people over time. This is great for measuring change in development. Like if we want to know to what extent early experiences in childhood predict long-term personality development in young adulthood. We could track people over years, maybe perhaps even decades of time. And the downsides to this are pretty obvious in the sense that they're costly and time consuming. It's very, very difficult to track people over long periods of time. A lot of longitudinal studies will be shorter in their time span, sometimes over weeks or months rather than years. In fact, I've done studies that are more short term, but still longitudinal, following people over a period of, let's say, half a year. Now, in the context of research methods, I might ask you, well, of all the methods we have at our disposal, which is the best one? And this would actually be a trick question because there is no best method. It all depends on what your research questions are. And there's always going to be trade-offs. In some studies, the best method will be a survey. In other studies, the best will be a longitudinal approach. And in other studies, we might want to use an implicit measure like the implicit association test, which we'll see a little bit later in the course. Overall, we're always going to have strengths and limitations for each method. And that's why no single study will ever truly definitively answer any research question. We always need to use multiple studies to approach the same research questions, but with different methods and different approaches.